Hello and welcome to the Writing for Academic Publication webinar series hosted by the Graduate Writing Center at Teachers College, Columbia University. My name is Catherine Chang-Stahl and I will be facilitating this webinar, so thank you for joining me. This particular webinar is focused on the steps involved in getting ready for submitting your manuscript. So if you are here, it hopefully means that you've already made preparations with the manuscript itself, you have prepared different revisions of it, and you are getting ready to upload your manuscript and submit it to the publication team at the Journal of Interest. So one part of making preparations for submission involves crafting the cover letter. Similar to a cover letter that you would submit as part of career documents for a job, this cover letter has very similar components and is directed at the lead editors of the journal that you are interested in having your work published in. Here I am sharing some pointers from Dr. John Wargo, who was very generous in providing some support in the crafting of the contents for this webinar series. So Dr. John Wargo says you want to direct your cover letter at the lead editors. Sometimes they're called associate editors. Sometimes they are the executive editors. There may be one or more. So you definitely want to look into the journal itself and have the names ready. And keep in mind that the editors may change from time to time. So if you have a database of journals that you're interested in submitting to, try to keep that up to date so that you are not titling your cover letter to the wrong individuals. As part of your cover letter, Dr. Wargo says you want to include some detail as to who you are. So if you are a student, you can certainly describe that, share your affiliation with the institution. You can also share some of your background, the focus of your scholarship, etc. You want to include an abstract, and this abstract can be reworded similar to the abstract that you have as part of your publication or your manuscript rather. So within this abstract, you want to highlight the broader argument and contributions and also significance of your manuscript to the publication site. In addition to including the abstract, it can be helpful to align your article to the aims and vision of the journal. So language for the mission and vision statement you can find directly in the aims and scopes section of the journal. And if this is something you want a refresher on, there is one webinar video that is focused on kind of finding a home for your manuscript. This step is important because, again, it shows that you have thought about the fit of your work for a particular publication site. It also shows that you've done your homework in terms of learning what the vision or visions are for your target journal. And finally, Dr. Wargo says it can be helpful to include certain particulars and logistics about your research. So is the study IRB approved? And it can also be helpful to have a statement that says this particular manuscript is not under review at other venues. So using that checklist from Dr. John Wargo, I'm sharing here screenshots of a sample cover letter from Dr. Wargo himself. We received permission to share these. So as you can see, this is a typical cover letter structure. You want to address the editor or editors in the first section, include the date. And here in the very first paragraph, Dr. Wargo is introducing himself. In the second paragraph, Dr. Wargo is highlighting aspects of the article in terms of its broader argument and contributions to the field. So you can take a look at the language that he is using here. I think it can be helpful to read someone else's cover letter for a couple of things. One, for the structure, and also for the language being used. So examples here could be the ways that this article is drawing upon conceptual approaches, or it is informed by these theoretical frameworks. It involves thinking with the concept of, etc. Here, you can also see the ways in which he is sharing how his findings are presented, and also a couple of highlights in terms of what the article is detailing. So you can see how there's some language taken directly from the abstract pertaining to sort of the larger argument, the key ideas, conclusions, etc., from the article itself. In the next paragraph, Dr. Wargo documents the article's relation to the mission and vision of the journal. So you can see here, there's language like impact. There's also language like it complements the larger aims and scope of the journal, right? So that language is taken directly from the website. Here, Dr. Wargo also provides an example. So he says, for example, my focus on, etc., aligns nicely with ... There's also another example where he goes to say, similarly, his focus on childhood writing would add to the journal's diversity of experience as represented in writing research. So again, the language of it would add to, focus aligns with, impact of, complements the, these are all sample language to show alignment between the manuscript and also the key features, characteristics of the journal. And finally, Dr. Wargo includes in the concluding paragraph certain particulars and logistics about the manuscript itself. So here he goes on to say, the work here has not been previously published and it's not being considered for publication in other venues. I think this line, even though it's a rather ordinary sentence, it's good to have this generic language to show that there are no conflicts of interest, that there are no down the line copyright or legal issues. And this just keeps things pretty straightforward for the editors and the publishers later on. And as you can see at the very end, you have Dr. Wargo's signature line with his contact information, etc. So this is the general anatomy of a cover letter. Of course, there are variations to this, but here's just a sample. Here I am showing you an example of a cover letter that I have submitted with my co-author. I did not have Dr. Wargo's outline of recommended sections, but I think that in general, the structure that I followed is also rather typical for a cover letter. And this was drafted using a template that my co-author, Professor Joanna Literat, had shared with me as an example. So as an exercise, feel free to pause this part of the webinar, take a look at the cover letter in front of you and see if you can check off certain points that Dr. Wargo recommends having in your cover letter. So in addition to drafting the cover letter, another component of preparing your manuscripts for submission involves returning to your manuscript and creating 2 versions of it. So in general, when you are submitting a manuscript to a journal, the journal team will ask you to submit a version that has all the author details removed. This is the anonymous version. In addition, they often ask for a ready-to-publish version that contains all the author details, including citational information and also the completed reference list. And this often is just to streamline the production process to keep your article moving along this timeline for journal submissions. So on the left, you can see the version without author details. And on the right, you see the version with author details. So I simply saved two versions of this Word document and submitted both to the submission site. So some things have remained constant, obviously the title, but as you can see on the right-hand side, you have the contact information of the authors, the affiliation. You can see that the word count is slightly different. For this particular journal, the article maximum was 8,000 words. So our anonymous version was a little bit under that, and our with author details version was a little bit over it. So we tried as much as possible to keep to the 8,000 word limit with all the author details. And at the very bottom, you have author note. This is very typical for sort of the cover page of a manuscript. So a cover page is yet another aspect of the manuscript that you want to have ready. And this is formatted per APA style, but of course you want to follow your journal's guidelines. Sometimes they use Chicago manual style, sometimes they use MLA style, but I would say the APA is still the most common. So here I'm just showing you another page for comparison. On the left-hand side, you can see how all the author details are removed and replaced with the word authors. And on the right-hand side, you can actually see the citation information. So the final thing that I want to point out when it comes to getting your manuscript ready for publication is to get yourself ready to have publicity once your article is published. So a couple of things to keep in mind. I learned from my co-author, Professor Literat, that it's helpful to have something called the ORC ID, or maybe it's called ORCID. In any case, it's something free. It allows you to sort of establish a profile for yourself as an author, as a researcher. It compiles all of your stats. So once you create an ORC ID and you link it to all of your manuscripts, then there's a way to kind of keep track of your digital footprint, if you will, or your author metrics. So as part of this ORC ID, once you sign up, you will have your unique ID number that you can input in the corresponding fields when you are submitting your manuscript. There's always a section for you to add your socials and etc. So for me, there is a place to upload my profile for LinkedIn, my ORC ID, my email, my affiliation, etc. In addition to setting up author IDs, you can also think about whether you want to also have a social network kind of profile. So most common, I would say, would be Twitter. Some people use Facebook, but this is all part of sort of spreading the news around your publication. It helps with viewership. It helps with just getting more traffic to your article. It heightens visibility, all of that. So I happen to have a Twitter account prior to this. I didn't have to set one up, but what was nice is people that I knew and also organizations and institutions that I'm part of, they were happy to help retweet information surrounding our publication. So this is something else that can help as part of pursuing kind of a scholarly career. And that's it for this webinar. If you have any more questions pertaining to the steps involved in preparing your manuscript for submission, feel free to drop us a line. Otherwise, look forward to having you join another webinar.